This GPU has held the throne of the most used graphics card from June of 2017 until October 2022 according to the Steam hardware survey, making it the most popular GPU among gamers for more than 5 years, only being dethroned by its younger brother, the GTX 1650. And the GPU we're talking about is the Pascal midrange champion, the GTX 1060.
Cause you're gonna get burned. Yeah, you're gonna get burned. Burned. Yeah, you're gonna get burned. Cause you're gonna get burned. They say you should never roll all the dice without a hand. It's make or break when you never did.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and in this video we'll be testing a very popular GPU, the GTX 1060. But there are two different versions of this GPU, the 6GB and the 3GB. What we have here today is the little brother, the 3GB version, a slightly cut down GPU of its bigger brother. I'll compare the specification a bit later. Holding the crown together with its more powerful sibling for 5 years is quite a feat. Nvidia has done such an amazing job with the Pascal series, creating, in my opinion, the best GPU ever released during my lifetime so far, the GTX 1080 Ti. Hopefully I can get one, so I can review that MVP of a GPU, but we're here to talk about the more affordable Pascal GPUs. The GTX 1060 3GB had a launch price of $199 Yes, that's right, $199 for a 60 class GPU. The Pascal architecture has brought amazing architecture improvements compared to Maxwell GTX 900 series architecture. The GTX 3GB using its 16nm process by TSMC had an amazing efficiency, often beating the GTX 1070 while consuming less power, 120 watts TDP compared to the 148 watts of the GTX 1070. Not only it is more efficient, but it also costs $130 less during launch. Can you hear that, Nvidia? Being better and costing less? I'm looking at you, RTX 4060 series. Now, let's take a closer look on the GPU we're testing out today, the Asus Dual GTX 1060 3GB OC. The GPU inside this card is the GP106, but the cut-down version. Compared to its bigger brother, the 6GB variant, this 3GB version has 1152 CUDA cores compared to 1280. That's 10% less CUDA cores. Unfortunately, as you might already know, it also has been gimped with its VRAM capacity from 6GB to 3GB. It is still GDDR5 running at 8 gigabits per second, giving it an effective bandwidth of 192.2 gigabytes a second on a 192-bit wide bus. Remember those days? Back when we get 192-bit bus for a 60 series card, unlike the 128-bit bus we have now with the the RTX 4060, or should I say, a repurposed RTX 4050. These past few generations have just been so disappointing for the affordable and mid-range budget cards. In my opinion, only the 6600 and 6700 XT from AMD series are the only worthwhile GPU in the mid-range category that you should consider, if you don't care about ray tracing and other Nvidia features, of course. Otherwise, you don't really have much choice aside on what they're offering right now, or if you want, you could entertain the used GPU market. So after that rant, let's go back to the video. Maybe if you didn't know, I actually reviewed this GPU back in 2021. So it's almost 2 years ago. If you want to see a closer look about the Asus model, check out that video. But in a nutshell, it is a pretty well built GPU. It does run great, quiet, and it looks pretty good. Though it doesn't have RGB, but for me, it doesn't really matter. So after all of that being said, it's time to install the GTX 1060 to my computer. Let's remove the main graphics card and then we're going to benchmark it. Of Of course, before uninstalling the GPU, we first need to turn off the computer. So let's do that. After that being removed, here's the graphics card that I removed. I'll be testing this in the future. If you guys are interested, this is the 6900 XT. And here is the 1060 from Nvidia, and we're going to install it on my computer. Let's do that. Well guys, I just want to point out, look at the size difference between both of these GPUs. Like, can you see that? Oh my god. Here they are side by side. This thing is so huge. I can't wait to review this and make a video out of it. But for now, we're doing the video of this little guy. Compared to my other graphics card, this thing only needs 6-pin power connector. So let's plug that right in here. There we go. Easy enough. Here's the moment of truth. Let's turn on the power supply and turn on the computer. It's a bit dusty, guys. It lights up. Oh, there's a little light right over there. Let's see if it boots. I need to install all the drivers and everything. It should work. Hopefully it does. And there we go. Here is the test system and the driver version used. Let's start with Apex Legends. At 1080p at lowest settings, I have an average of 122 FPS and 1% loss of 89. As you can see, the textures aren't great. I just put like around 2 to 3 gigabytes of textures, and they are not the best. But of course, you can imagine that having only 3 gigabytes of VRAM on this GPU. But as you can see, the FPS is decent for a 2016 graphics card. You can still play it competitively. Of course, you're not going to get 240 FPS and such, but you can definitely play it at these kinds of settings. So I think that's a win for the GTX 1060 3GB. I also tried putting it on 1440p to see how it works, and as you can see, the FPS just really dropped really hard. We're still running at lowest settings, but the average FPS is 70 and 36 1% lows. But as you can see in a moment, when there are lots of things that happening, I don't know what I'm doing here, the FPS just really drops, it just tanks. So I think you should just stick with anything. Now let's move to Call of Duty Warzone. At 1080p FSR 2.1 at minimum settings, we have an average FPS of 70 and 1% loss of 38. I think with these kinds of FPS, it is casually playable, but if you want to be competitive, you really need a newer GPU because you're not gonna get anything better than this. Or you can maybe turn down the resolution, but a BR game, a Battle Royale, where you need to look really far away, I think that's not ideal. But if you just want to casually play it with your friends, this is pretty good enough. Now let's hop on Cyberpunk. At 1080p, FSR 2.1 at performance mode, at low settings, we have an average FPS of 49 and 1% loss of 35. As you can see, with FSR performance, the quality is just not that great. There's a lot of ghosting and the texture just looks a little bit weird. But if you don't run performance mode with FSR, the FPS just really tanks. But as you can see, if you're okay with this kind of settings at around 50 FPS average, it's playable, but coming from a 6900 XT, for me it's really hard to play. But I don't know, for some people I think this is alright if you're used to 30 FPS. Maybe you can put on quality, FSR quality, but it's okay. Doom Eternal. At 1080p low, we have an average FPS of 81 and 1% loss of 52. The game didn't even allow me to put it on medium settings because this game is just a VRAM hog. But at these settings, we have an average of 81, so it's playable. I would have preferred something like 90 or 120 for my 170Hz monitor, but it's still casually playable enough. If you want, you can lower the settings to 720p to have a higher FPS, but if you're satisfied with 60 FPS, this is pretty good enough. I've been playing a lot of racing games lately, and the GTX 1063GB at F1 2022 1080p at high settings has an average FPS of 76 and 1% loss of 67. Here on Spa, we're approaching Rouge and Radion with the Parrots. As you can see, the game is running pretty well for a 2016 card. You can still play it at quite decent settings. As you can see, it's on high settings. I'm quite satisfied with the FPS performance of this GPU. For racing games, I think around 60 is good enough. You don't need more than that to enjoy the game. And here we are with the classic, Fortnite. What is going on here? I'm riding a dinosaur. I don't know, I just test this game, I no longer play it. But at Fortnite DX12 1080p at medium settings, we have an average FPS of 78 and 1% loss of 48. Of course, if you want more performance, you can drop it to performance mode API and you're going to get more than 100 FPS. But at this kind of settings, it's still casually playable at okay graphics. Now let's try God of War. At 1080p low settings, we have an average FPS of 63 and 1% loss of 54. I think this is a really decent performance for the GTX 1063GB. As you can see, it's quite playable. We're running up here on these walls with Atreus, and we'll see if we turn on FSR how much we'll gain, if it's actually worth it or not. After turning on FSR to quality mode, still at low settings, we have an average FPS of 69 and 1% loss of 60. Of course, the average has gotten up a little bit, but it's the 1% loss. We have an average of 60 now. So if you have a 60Hz monitor, it will be more consistent, so a bit more pleasing to play with. But it's not that big of a difference. And here, maybe if you nitpick, you can see some difference in quality, but I think you can stick with FSR 2.0 at quality mode and play this game. But if you're really seeing some artifacts or something with graphics, you can play at native settings and at a lower FPS, but it's not that big of the difference, so it's up to you. So here we are with GTA 5 1080p at high settings. We have an average FPS of 83 and 1% loss of 60. I'm here on top of a mountain and I'm trying to do a jump, and let's see how it goes. But this game, of course, is released in 2013 and 2014 for the PC, if I remember correctly, or maybe 2015. It runs pretty great with the GTX 1060. Here we are with my favorite MOBA. At 1080p medium settings, we have an average FPS of 79 and 1% loss of 56. This is decent enough to play MOBA games, but as you can see, this is quite action-packed. There's lots of shooting, and when there's many things that are going on, you gotta have FPS drops. So maybe if I drop it to low settings, it will be a little bit better, but for casual gamers, this is quite good enough. Red Dead Redemption 2, such a beautiful game, but unfortunately, with the GTX 1060 3GB, it's not as beautiful. But at 1080p medium settings, favor of performance, we have an average FPS of 54 and 1% loss of 44. It's definitely casually playable. You can play it at these kinds of settings, but as you can see, the textures is just so bad. You cannot look at that, look at the ground, guys. I have been spoiled by my 6900 XT at 1440p, but you can still play it, so that's a good thing. Now let's try a more easy to run games for the GTX 1060. Valorant. At 1440p, at medium preset, we have an average FPS of 245 and 1% loss of 169. You can definitely play this game at these kinds of settings and be competitive with it. that's a really good performance from the GTX 1060. I'm really pleased with it. And here we are with the last game, Overwatch 2, another esports title. I'm actually running it at 1440p too, and at medium settings. We have an average FPS of 128 and 1% loss of 82. I was playing this, look at this match. Ignore my aim, it's really bad, but it's quite playable. So you guys are at the conclusion. Nice, good job guys. Thank you for sticking with me until here. And after all of those dozen games, 12 games, the GTX 1060 2GB is really showing its age at some games, like Cyberpunk and Red Dead Redemption. You cannot run those games at native quality, you have to turn on FSR or something to help it a little bit. But at some games like Overwatch, esports titles, you can still play them at 1440p. So that's probably the use of the GTX 1060 3GB for now. But if you're looking for a new card now in 2023, it's better off you just buy a new RX 6600 or the 7600. The RTX graphics card is not that, they are not priced really well, at least here in Italy. So I suggest you just grab the Radeon cards. Of course, if you don't care about ray tracing and other NVIDIA features. Otherwise, check out the RTX 4060, even if it's not that great of a graphics card, but if you're upgrading from a 1060 or even something much less powerful than that, then you really don't have that much choice. But from a 1060 to a 4060, that's quite a big jump, so I think you're going to love the performance that that graphics card is going to give you. Thanks for watching the video everybody, I appreciate your support. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. Subscribe to not miss upcoming YouTube videos. If you have questions or suggestions or anything, just type it in the comments. I'll reply when possible. Share this video if you think someone would wanna see it. I appreciate all you viewers of the channel. Take care and see you next time. Bye!